light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I just wanted to offer a few thoughts and reflections on, I suppose, what some people might call attitude adjustment, where we're commanded to feel a certain way, or you shouldn't feel that, or you should feel this. And I guess I kind of come at it from the perspective of honesty and common sense, that you feel whatever you feel, but there are things that affect feelings, and there are things that affect perception. And if we can contribute something to the situation that affects our feelings, or contribute something to the situation that affects our perspective, whether it's removing ourselves from the room or adding something else, something or someone else to the room, or changing our activity or our role within that space. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that we can have a really specific, direct, positive effect upon what's going on, if we remember to be self-aware enough of what we're feeling and of what's going on in our environment to take that sort of proactive action. Which is why, the benefit of memory and experience is that the more things we've been through, the more memories we have to tell us things that might work within whatever situation we're in. A wonderful book I read a number of years ago is called 3 Faces of Mind by Elaine de Beauport. And in there she talks about 10 different ways that the body, that a person stores intelligence in their body, many of which are not located in the brain. But I really liked her definition of emotions, that they are essentially the mind's ability or inability to meet its needs. So that when the mind perceives a need that it is not able to meet, it may begin to feel frustrated or angry or fearful. And on the other hand, when a mind perceives that all needs are being met, it creates feelings of contentment and happiness and peace. The corollary to that is if you see someone demonstrating fear or anger or any of the negative emotions, it's fairly safe to interpret that there is some need in their life that is not being met, or in oneself. That when I'm feeling a negative emotion, I have to figure out what the need is, and then I have to find a legitimate way that that need can be met, in order to reestablish the positive emotions I'd rather be feeling. Because the emotions are more like a thermometer than a thermostat. A thermostat, you change the setting and it immediately activates certain influences that give the thermometer a different context to react to. And in a similar sort of way, if I'm feeling negative emotions, I find what need is creating that, and I feel that need, and then it changes the context, and I get an entirely different reading on my emotions. So, but sometimes, most of life I find is lived in the gray areas between the extremes. So, as nice as that all sounds, to say how we can affect our emotions and move them in positive directions, sometimes we don't have the strength or we don't have the resources. If the need is, for example, that one is hungry, but there simply isn't any food, then you can shift to say, okay, so how do I find a way to be happy and at peace while I am hungry? And there may not be an easy answer to that question. It may not be simply a question of resigning yourself to the situation, because even if you resign yourself and mentally accept that there's no way to escape this is simply the truth of the moment, that doesn't make the mind feel any better, the fact that it's doing without the food it needs, or whatever it needs. So, but there's another layer beyond that yet, though, where we look at our environment as interactive, that there's something that can contribute to it. There's also something that comes to us from our environment. Ways of seeing the different people and dynamics in our life that we don't always recognize at the time that that's what they are or could be in our lives. If you had a particular problem, just pick an example. Let's say I'm going to give a speech someplace and the microphone isn't working, and the person who's helping me up on stage, who's running the soundboard and everything, can't figure out what's wrong. I can turn to the audience and call out as loudly as I can, is there anyone here who knows about microphones? And the person who only moments before I thought of as, quote, just a member of the audience, may stand up and say, actually, I know a lot about microphones. What can I help you with? And comes and finds the problem, and it's resolved. My perspective of that person in that moment shifts from being just an audience member to being exactly the right audio technician that I needed at that moment. And how wonderful of God or the universe or serendipity or whatever for providing that person in the audience. So, as a corollary to that, before I jump to the point, Leonardo da Vinci supposedly was the bastard son of a peasant, and a great many artists and composers and writers throughout history have come from questionable circumstances as well. In each of their lives, there was a point at which they were just some little kid that nobody knew who they would become, how they turn out, or anything. In the same way that there was a point in their lives where they were undiscovered before they became the historical persons we remember, jumping forward to where we are today, there may in fact be dozens of Leonardo da Vinci's and Michelangelo's and Beethoven's and Madame Curie's and all sorts of incredible people, Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman, and on and on and on. So many incredible people. There may be equivalents to them within our world right now, but they may be people who are 8 and 9 and 10 years old, or 12 or 13 or 17 or 5. We don't know what they will become or how they will bless the world in their lifetimes. But if we did, we would know more specifically how to nurture them. Since we don't know specifically, we still have to do what we can, because we're actually encouraging the healing and health and strength of humanity by doing so. It kind of comes back to each of us being a sort of divine mystery for everybody around us. That nobody around us, even if they've known us our whole lives, can say with absolute certainty what we would do in every situation, because they're not us. They've seen bits and pieces, but there's also bits and pieces of us that they haven't seen. In choosing to look at each other as a potential treasure, however, it raises the probability that miraculous wonders can occur, because when we look at each other as valuable, we begin doing things that support each other and that allow the possibility of certain collaborations, certain ways of working together that wouldn't have happened otherwise. If I looked at that person in my hypothetical example about the audio equipment as being just someone in the audience, and I assumed from the beginning that there was no one in the audience who could help, it would have made the problem 100 times worse, and something that we wouldn't have fixed in 5 or 10 minutes before we conducted the lecture on whatever subject it was. Because I was willing to let the person in the audience also be an audio technician, because I was willing to allow that person to be a multidimensional being who had more than one dimension of who and what he was, that allowed for the miraculous solution to happen. In a similar sort of way, there was a time in history when the Geiger counter had not been invented yet. People still got sick if they were around too much radiation, around uranium or what have you, but they didn't know why. And then at some point someone invented a Geiger counter, and we had a way of measuring that particular kind of energy and radiation. In the diverse places our lives go, from mountains to valleys, from cities to country, all over. We are surrounded by this context of people and nature and weather and clouds and everything. And often we don't look any further than what the conditions are at the moment. Is it going to rain today? Well, it's not raining now. That tells me a lot, right? Being a little sarcastic there, of course. But over and above that, there are ways of looking at what does or doesn't happen that can be creatively and spiritually and imaginatively empowering. You know, growing up within the context of the Roman Catholic Church, the perception was always that God lived in the church, which seemed to imply that the minute you left the church, God wouldn't be there anymore. But of course, the nuns insist on teaching us that no, God is everywhere. Well, if God is everywhere, why are we concerned about the church being God's house? Well, it depends on how you look at it. The concern about it being God's house is not so much, I think, that they wanted to contain God there, as that it was more the effect it had on me by being aware of the church being God's house, so to speak, that it would move me to demonstrate reverence and respect that I might not have otherwise demonstrated. In a similar sort of way, I've heard various people speak of going out in nature whenever they want to commune with God, that there's something about being out in trees and forests and fields and on mountains and along rivers and on lakes and so forth, that people are aware of touching something bigger than themselves, that they are aware of some mysterious something more that is there, that it's not just a tree, it's not just a meadow, but it's everything you see and a whole lot of stuff that you don't see as well, that make it feel the way it does and live from one month to the next throughout the year the way it does. Taking all that into mind, and because I like hiking and going up into the mountains and so forth, I wrote a song some time ago that I'd like to share with you now, that basically, well, as the song says, it's recognizing all these different possibilities around as being, in a sense, the fingerprints of God, some indication that God is there or was there, and that somehow all this testifies to something bigger than myself, creating incredible beauty that is also amazingly balanced and integrated in terms of its symbiotic relationships. Each thing creating what the other needs that it can't create for itself. And by all of them working together, forming literally an entire world. So I'd like to share that song with you now. This mountain trail is steep and rocky, the air is thin and cold. I'm ascending its winding gravel pathway to make peace with my soul. The world below now seems so small, and the heavens close enough to touch. And where the two meet is where I now stand, still loving you so much. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. So why can't I see it when treading that concrete or crossing an asphalt street? That persistent above me are billowing clouds, ready my gaze to greet. Floating along, they wave to me softly in silence high up above, just wanting me now and then to remember the greatest gift still is love. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. I sit on a park bench and watch the sunset behind a mountain's top. In the noisy crush of too many people, it's hard to know where to stop. If all these distractions make me blind to everything else around, I could even forget that where I am is potentially holy ground. Your fingerprints are all around me as we play hide and seek. Your smile I can see just over yonder, framed by each mountain peak. As the wind dances round and the sun is warm, I'm so glad to be part of it all. Just help me remember when back in the city that heaven surrounds us all. Yes, heaven surrounds us all. Yes, heaven can live in us all. You know, there was a particular day where it seemed like everything had gone wrong. It was late summer, and I was trying to process all the different discouragements and stuff. And, okay, where do we go from here? You know, life pitches curveballs, we have to adapt. So I was doing my best to mentally and emotionally adapt, and I looked out the back door into my backyard, you know, my fixer-upper house that I keep hoping will eventually be finished when I finally fix all the things that are wrong with it. But it's a place to call home, even in its questionable condition. And I had gotten the backyard fenced, and so my dogs were out in the backyard playing, and one was barking, the other was running in circles, and the evening sun was coming down through the branches of the trees, kind of spreading out across the meditation and sacred circle that I built back there that I affectionately call my cathedral. And there was just somehow in that moment something impressed upon me, the simple beauty of the scene and of the moment, that no matter what happened tomorrow, I had this moment where me and my furry family in the backyard, and for a moment, somehow, for no apparent reason, it just seemed like everything was okay. That whatever trouble tomorrow had, whatever trouble yesterday had, for the moment, I could sit on the bench in my backyard and watch the dogs playing, and of course, as soon as I sat down, a bunch of them came running up to lick my face. And everything just felt really, really okay. But I had to take the moment to see more than just the appearance. I had to see that there was an emotional, spiritual balance and harmony to what was going on in that moment. That there was no violence or hostility, there was no exclusion, there was no competition. It was just a moment, perhaps a brief moment, but nevertheless a very true moment of being, in a simple, unpretentious sort of way, being happy in life. A moment of happiness, a moment of contentment, a moment where everything was really and truly okay. And I have to think that there was something of the Spirit of God in that allowed me to feel that way. Something that said, whatever is crazy, it really will all work out. And I don't always feel that way, and I can't always rise above my circumstances to see that everything really, really will work out. I mean, there are a lot of times where I say, yes, give me something to, some sort of evidence that things are going to work out. And a lot of times the evidence isn't there. And I can't superimpose it. If I can't feel it, if I can't find it, if I can't see it, I don't lie to myself that I can. But there have been enough moments, and as time goes on, an increasing number of moments, where I can say, yeah, I have experienced moments of peacefulness, of balance, of harmony, of love working. I recall reading someplace or seeing a plaque once that said there is no psychotherapy like a puppy licking your face. And I know some people don't like that. I choose to allow my dogs to express affection that way, and it really does. I mean, their enthusiasm for simply being with me, just sitting on my lap, is amazing. My old English sheepdog is amazing in the morning. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. I'm barely awake, and he is just whining and hopping and jumping and so excited, and I just laugh and I say, Gareth, if everybody had as much enthusiasm for getting out of bed in the morning as you do, the world would be a different place. Because he just can't wait to get out and go running all around the backyard and have breakfast and go jogging, and he's got so much enthusiasm for life. And to find a moment where I can look out and see my dogs and recognize this configuration of personalities and relationships with which I've been blessed. And sometimes the distractions are too intense, and I forget that where I am is potentially holy ground. And I forget the possibilities of taking a deep breath, stepping back, and just saying, you know, I'm smart enough. I've been through so many things already. I've adapted to a lot of different things. You know, if the worst that can happen does, I will pick up the pieces and build it up again, because I have the ability to do so. And sometimes I need to take that emotional grieving time first, you know, to experience the loss, not to deny it, not to lie to myself about it. But on the other side of that is always a new beginning. And wherever we find ourselves, there's still clouds overhead, there's still the sun shining, somewhere there are still birds singing. None of that ceases to exist, no matter how difficult or dark the present moment may get. And you know, I'm not trying to be a blind Pollyanna here. I'm trying to say life is multidimensional. And when we can see the unseen dimensions of divine presence and of the possibilities for hope and love and faith, that may be just the strength we need to get through all the other moments. Thank you very much for watching. May you be abundantly blessed in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Thank you.